Okay, so you're looking at images that I made during a weekend overnighter that I just went on. I've got this fancy custom-made Bear Paw Wilderness Cuben fiber A-frame tent, and I'm guilty of not using it very often, so I decided to go use it this weekend and familiarize myself with the gear since I have it and I really should use it, so I went and tried it out. And I also took the Gossamer Gear Summit Pack 2, the Gossamer Gear Long White Air Pad. I had on a Capline 1 technical t-shirt, and I brought the Mountain Hardwear Spark sleeping bag. So I had all ultra lightweight gear, and all of that gear worked great. The only problems that I had were with other stuff that I brought. I wore some Puma sweatpants that got really hot. I really should have layered and brought some swim trunks or something to swim in because I had plenty of time to get in the water. There was plenty of opportunities to get in the water, but I couldn't because I couldn't take off my track pants, and I also didn't bring any soap or a toothbrush or toilet paper. So it was mostly sanitary things. I smelled really bad the next day, and I got kind of hot that night when it was time to go to bed. But I had a 2-liter water bottle with me and a sandwich, which held me over for 24 hours. And it was really good weather, so the weather wasn't an issue. And basically, what I found was that the Cuben fiber A-frame is not like a tent. Cuben fiber is really for a tarp, and it doesn't protect you from the sun. It gets warm under the sun, but it does do a great job protecting you of the rain and of wind. And it has everybody knows it has a higher tensile strength than steel, so it really blocks the wind. And sometimes, the wind is what prevents people from being able to sleep. So it's nice to have that wind block. But if you've got a great sleeping bag, which for me the Mountain Hardwear Spark it was that night. That night in the temperature that it was out, which was a little bit cool, that sleeping bag worked fantastic. Just, the sleeping bag worked great. And so what the Cuben fiber A-frame did was it blocked the wind, and it just gave the sleeping bag that extra kick that made it really, really easy to sleep. But basically, what I found was that a cloud of humidity formed inside of the A-frame, and the Cuben fiber doesn't have any absorptive quality. So if you've got like a 100 denier nylon tent, it's going to absorb that cloud of humidity that forms inside of the shelter. The temperature inside the shelter is slightly warmer than the temperature outside, and that causes condensation. And the condensation is a cloud. It's a fog of moisture inside the tent, and that cloud of moisture needs to go somewhere in order to feel comfortable inside the tent. And with Cuben fiber, it can't really go anywhere because the Cuben fiber is not going to absorb that moisture. So what I ended up having to do was just open the doors of the tent. So I had my mesh doors, but my Cuben fiber doors were open. So the wind, I was kind of like sleeping outside just with the doors of my tent wide open. So really, I think that Cuben fiber is awesome, but it's for situations where it's comfortable to sleep outside, which it was. If you're in the forest, I was on the summit, so if I had been in the forest where it's damp, I would have felt damp because, you're going to feel the same as whatever the environment is like outside where you're sleeping, that's what it's going to be like. It's not like a tent, whereas a tent creates two separate environments. It absorbs the condensation that forms inside of the tent and it causes the inside of the tent to feel dry with a vestibule for cooking, etc. Where with the A-frame that I had made of Cuben fiber, the doors need to be open, so it's just blocking the wind and blocking the rain, and you're basically gonna feel the same as you would feel if you were sleeping outside. So it's not really the same kind of sensation as a tent. But it did work, and it is nice. The Cuben fiber that I have from Bear Paw, it really kind of sparkles in the sun. It's like a pretty luxurious material. And because it doesn't get wet, I had to leave the doors of the A-frame open. So there was no moisture inside the tent. There was no condensation taking place. So I was able to kind of roll up against the walls of the single wall tent of the Cuben fiber shelter and not get wet. The Cuben fiber gets kind of warm and dry and comfortable feeling. It doesn't get wet like a tent. But that's pretty much sums it up. Thanks a lot.